Okay, welcome back. In this half, we're just going to do a basic shine from stripping down what's already on the boot with some saddle soap and conditioning it and then building a shine back up. I'm not sure if we'll have enough time to bring it back to a high shine, but we'll go through the process for you. Okay, so I've just got a little bit of water here in the lid of my saddle soap tin, and just getting, this bit gets a little bit messy. So a little bit of lather onto the boots. This takes off what you've already got layered on there. Now, I'm very aware that what I've got on here is mirror gloss, and I therefore know that it's actually going to take quite a few layers of saddle soaping to get that off, because it doesn't come off easily. It actually creates a really hard shell on the boot. So I'm just going to wipe that off. It is coming off a little bit, actually. But it actually takes quite a lot to get the mirror gloss off your boot. In fact, I have resorted in the past to using a alcohol and water mix, so a white spirit and water mix, ethyl alcohol. Usually I have it in a 30-70 solution, so 30% ethyl alcohol. But you get the idea. You need to go all the way around the welt of your shoes and your boots. So at this point, this is where you would be using your toothbrush in order to get into all of those little nooks and crannies. Some people use a nylon brush, which you can use as an alternative. If you've got really dirty boots, I have got a brush which is one of those nylon brushes that has got wire in the middle of it, and I tend to use that on really muddy soles and deep treads, and that works really well at getting those clean. So I'm just going to do another layer of saddle soap over that mirror gloss. Now, these are harness boot. These harnesses are fixed, so they don't come off. So I actually would just be going over the harness completely with my polish, with my saddle soap. I also have another pair of harness boots here, which belong to Master DK. And these have a removable harness. So for those, I would actually take the harness off, clean the harness separately, and clean the whole boot. Just to be aware that when you're doing your saddle soaping, etc., you really don't want to leave something like a harness on. You want to clean underneath it, because you can get quite a buildup of dust and debris underneath there. And the harness itself could do with a little bit of TLC as well. The same with laces. If you have laces in your boots, I've actually taken the lace out of this one. This is a Dana police boot. In here, inside the frog here, you tend to get a lot of debris building up. So when I saddle soap, I like to take the laces out, so you can get right into the nooks and crannies there and clean it all down. So I'm aware that we don't have very much time for this shine, so I'm just going to press on and get as far as I can with this. Okay, so you can see that in comparison to the other one, which is still a high shine, this is now looking quite dull. It hasn't taken all of the mirror gloss off because, as I say, that takes quite some time to come off. that is one of the disadvantages of using mirror gloss, that it actually takes an awful lot of elbow grease to get that off. But I'm going to leave that there. Okay, the next thing I would do with this is I'm going to use the Colonel gel because it works really well at sinking into the boot and creating a shine on top. So you want to dry your boot off before you put your conditioner on. Get as much of the moisture off, which is why I use these microfiber towels. They're very good at actually wicking away the moisture from the saddle soaping. And you probably spend quite a bit more time than I'm going to rubbing this in and getting them conditioned all over. You want to make sure you get underneath the harness there. And the leather of the harness is a lot softer than the toe of the boot. You want to make sure that that's nicely conditioned as well. And it's loose enough that you can just slide your fingers underneath and make sure that the underneath of the boot there is also conditioned. Wipe off some residue. If you've saddle soaked a boot, you really don't want to put polish on it unless you have conditioned it, because it does strip away a lot of the natural oils in the leather, and you really want to replace those, or your boots are going to dry out quite quickly. I can see a question about that product. Was it about the conditioner? That's Colonel. It's a German product. The Germans tend to have a lot of very natural products for their boot blacking, and they're very particular about what goes into them. And I find that the German products are actually a really, really high quality. This is my favorite conditioner. It works just as well on leather floggers. It works really well on garment leather, soft leather, any of those really much more delicate leathers as well. But it works really well on your boots if you really want to create a shine. Yeah. So I'm just going to, there was one of the products that I keep in my boot black kit, which most of the people don't. And that is, I keep these, which are soft cotton wool makeup pads. They're the very flat, polished cotton. And I can actually go and clean a pair of boots and not use anything other than my fingers and these, and a piece of buffing cloth, which I use silk for my buffing cloth. So I can actually do a shine without using a brush, and I have worked that way quite some time. There are times when I'll use a brush, and it depends on the polish I'm using and the boots that I'm polishing. But I'm going to show you just how I use a little bit of water. Sorry. So I've just dipped my cotton wool in water and a little bit of polish on there. It's quite wet. You can see some of the moisture on the boot there. You just want to keep a steady pressure so that it glides across the leather. If it starts to stick, if you feel that it drags on the leather, you need a little bit more moisture, so you need just a little bit more water. Doesn't matter if you can see the water on the boot, that actually helps to create the friction that you need in order to polish it up. I'm just taking a small amount of polish each time, really just tipping it onto the polish there. And in between layers, I'm going to use my brush. You don't have to. Most bootblacks use a brush at this point. I quite often don't, depending on what I'm polishing, but that's just a personal preference. It creates a nice buff with the polish and brings up the shine. You can see that shine's beginning to come back now. I'm going to go back for another coat of polish. Just a little bit more polish onto the cotton wool there. When you get the tension right with the amount of pressure you're putting on the boot, you feel how it glides over the leather. And you'll know when you've got it right. So if there's any drag at all, you either need a bit more water or a tiny bit more polish. But you don't need much big quantities of either. You just add in small increments. You can see that that shine is beginning to come back. It's not as good as the other one is. We're just going to... The brush actually hardens the wax. It creates a harder coat and it brushes out any not imperfections, but where you've got different thicknesses and layer of polish left on the toe of the boot. It will help to brush that out. That shine is beginning to come back. Now I would normally do another layer. I'd probably do about 5 layers if I was taking my time over these. Because the depth of the polish that you're putting on is what gives you a really good shine at the end. And I'd also be careful about what I'm using, where I'm using. So the harder the wax, the easier it is to get a high shine with it. The sapphire wax, this one is softer than the mirror gloss, but it's harder than the Angelus is. The Lincoln is harder than this, so and the mirror gloss is harder than the Lincoln is. You also want to be careful about the climate that you're using those waxes in. The wilder the climate, as it were, so the colder and wetter the climate, the harder the wax, sorry, the softer the wax you want to use. Hard wax in cold conditions will flake and crack. So actually that would be a case for using something like a kiwi, which is a real soft wax. I tend to layer my polishes in hardness, so I will use a softer polish underneath my top coat. And then for a more durable top coat, I will use something like the Mirror Gloss. I must have dropped that one because it's cracked in there. Okay. So this is a much harder wax. It's actually taking a fair bit more pressure to actually get any onto the cotton wool. And you put it on in small amounts, really small amounts. And as it's a harder wax, it doesn't glide as easily. You actually need more water to apply it into a smooth coat. The other thing to be wary of if you're using a harder wax is you don't want to get much harder wax build up into the creases of the boot where the boot bends, because that is going to crack and flake a lot quicker in those areas. So that is another reason for using a softer wax underneath, because you would obviously polish the whole of the boot with the softer wax, and then you just want your hard wax polish on the toe, on the flat surfaces where you're going to pick up that shine, and you're going to create that high shine on the toes. And the other place that you do it would be here on the heel of the boot, on those hard areas that don't bend and flex.
5-minute warning for Q&A, Al.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to use, this is my favourite buffing cloth, and it's a piece of very fine Chinese silk. It's a very fine grained silk, and it's very smooth. I know a lot of people like to use stockings, nylons, and that again creates a good high shine, a good buffing cloth. But I like using my piece of silk, which I've had for many, many years, and it's been washed many, many times, and it's very soft. It's actually hard to do this and show you on camera because it's not the right angle for me. So I'm just going to go away and do it down here, where I can hold it between my legs. Basically, what you're trying to do is create a very smooth, no resistance, quick friction over the toe of the boot. So you can see how that shine is beginning to come up now. I'm not happy with that. I wouldn't consider that finished. I would put at least another one coat onto that. And I would have also done the heels and the main body of the boot as well. But you can see how the process works and how you're beginning to build that shine back up again. Just a comparison with the other boot, which I didn't strip. It's nearly there, it's not quite. Okay, any questions?
There was one from the last session left. Gabriel asked if there's a particular care routine depending on the type of leather. So you've been kind enough to show everyone that first that how to put on a high shine. Is there anything else that you want to add, just as a general purpose?
Softer leather boots that don't have that hard shell of leather, I would use the creams on. So it really is, it's what suits your type of leather that you've got, really. As I say, the oil tans, they all at some point need cleaning and they all need conditioning. Whatever leather you've got, that's your basic first steps, is clean it, clean the soles, clean the welt, clean in all the nooks and crannies, clean the leather, dry that off, so you're taking as much of the surface moisture out as you can. The wetter you get it, the harder it will be to get polish to really create a shine on it, though. So just be aware of that. If I'm doing boots at home, I will leave an hour between applying my saddle soap. But if you're on a stand doing boots as they come, you have less options of doing that. So you want to be careful how wet you get the boots, especially if you want to get a decent high shine on it. If they are oil tans, it doesn't really matter because you're not going to create a high shine on those anyway. And the same with the softer leather boots. So yes, you do your cleaning, your conditioning, and your type of conditioner is really dependent on what you're going to do and the type of leather it is. So the harder leathers that you're trying to create a high shine on, I tend to use the creams. That's my personal preference. I do know people that put grease on their hard leathers and still manage to create a high shine. But I like things to be easy, and I know that the cream conditioners will be much easier for me to get a high shine on them afterwards, immediately.
So Reese asked, you have a lot of things in your kit bag. What would you recommend for someone curious and just starting out?
Curious and just starting out.
Just your basics.
One brush. Make this as good a quality brush as you can get. The softer the bristles, the easier it will be to create a buff with that. You might want either one of these or one of these as a cleaning brush. You don't have to. You can just use cotton wool or a rag. A lot of people like applying their polish with a cloth. This is a soft cotton cloth. I know people who use strips of jersey, and you just twist your cloth around and use the flat part there to dip in your water and in your polish. I like using the cotton pads. That's just my preference. I do also use a cloth sometimes. It depends really what I'm doing. And I know people who have a preference for really old washed out cotton t-shirts that they cut into strips. Because the softer the cloth, the less friction you're going to get dragging on the boot when you're polishing with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, a cloth or some cotton pads, a brush, and a couple of types of polish, a softer wax and a harder wax. If you're just starting out, you're really not going to have all of the colors and things that people want. So, you know, most people have black boots. If you're on a boot black stand, most of the boot blacks are really happy to share. And, you know, if you don't have a color, they'll say, oh, I think I've got that, and they'll hand it to you and you can use it and hand it back again afterwards. That's my experience anyway. I haven't met any boot blacks who aren't happy to share. It's very much a camaraderie thing working on a boot black stand. So
brilliant. Thanks, Al. We've still got a couple more. Blues asked about what about white or light colored leather? And I know earlier on you talked about using cream when you didn't have the color. Did you need to add anything to that answer, or is that enough for now?
If you're using light colored leather to condition it, the greases are going to discolor your leather. So Huberts will darken your leather. So will the Wrens, although the Wrens is a little bit lighter than the Hubert, so it won't darken it as much. I would use, if you've got a light coloured leather, I would use glycerine soap rather than saddle soap. And with any of the soft leathers as well, I would tend to use a glycerine soap. It's not as harsh. But yes, if you're going to use a light coloured leather and you want a conditioner that isn't really going to affect the colour, Colonel is very good, and so is the Angelus and the Wren's. Although the Wren's, I'm aware, does darken it very, very slightly.
Gabriel's asked about care for the sole of the boot. Any last moments? You've got about 1 minute.
Wash it.
I like that. Concise. I like it. Okay,
Wash
we're done
it.
with the questions in this session.
Okay, thank you very much. Anything else that you'd like to share, Al, before we go?
No, I'd like to share a little bit about what boot blacking does for me. I like working on people's boots because they always have a story. They have a connection to the person, and the person has a history with that boot. And even if they're new boots, they have an excitedness about that great pair of boots they've just bought. So there are always stories. I came back from Darklands with some beautiful stories about, you know, guys who came with really scuffed up boots and said, these are my favorite boots. I'm never going to get rid of them until they're falling off my feet. So just make them look as best as you can, because, you know, one guy said, I've climbed every mountain in Iceland in these boots. You know, and he obviously loved his boots and wasn't ever going to get rid of them if he could possibly help it. So I love the stories that people have with their boots, and that is a really good part of boot blacking for me.
Fantastic, thank you. I just want to point out to everybody, please keep a lookout for Alistair's website, European Boot Black 2020. It's coming soon, and as well as the Patreon, the link is in the chat. If you don't want to go that far back, Leather Girl Heart is going to take all the links and put them into the event page. And I just want to thank everybody who's come and asked questions, and thank you, Alistair.
Thank you, everyone.
My pleasure.
Brilliant, thank you.
Feel free to unmute and hurrah.
Hurrah.